So news drop here. See how we react. Right, do we want to attack sell side or do we find resistance here inside these fair value gaps and just continuing to push higher? I'll kind of try to talk out loud as much as I can, but just for fair warning, right? A lot of this stuff, most of the time, I'm just sitting here doing nothing. So it can be quiet, can be boring, but that's what trading is really. A lot of sitting on your hands until, right, you see something that jumps out to you. So we immediately rebalance this candle here. Right, didn't leave any fair value gap open. We'll see if we now continue to expand higher. There we go. So you see after immediately rebalancing this candle, and what does that mean, right? We opened up here bullishly, right? We didn't leave a fair value gap, but this candle's low, right, is exactly in line with this candle's high. So we rebalance this whole range and just continue pushing higher. While we're running this high, NQ is actually failing to run its high. So right, so if this SMT remains in place, we'll use that. I think we got, who was that? Swell. Would that pull back to the fair value gap before going back up higher? I mean, right, if theoretically, if you're on a lower time frame, we could see that, right? We understand the market is fractal. So for your question, this really can be classified as a swing low, and this can be the swing high. So yeah, it would make sense that we have a low, a swing high, a lower low, gets broken here. So right as we trade back into this up close candle, that would become our breaker. Right, this is very fractal, so I wouldn't really look for it as an entry, but the logic behind it would make sense, yeah. At 9:59. So I'm just watching. Are down close candles continuing to support price? Because if so, that's a good sign for bullish order flow. So just watching right at these levels, holding price and continuing to send it higher. As I mentioned, we have SMT here. So if I were to see like this low get broken, while NQ is also breaking this low here, then that would be a sign for me to start looking for shorts possibly. But for now, right, not trying to catch tops or anything like that. Just letting Monday's price action play out, seeing if we want to continue bullish. Ultimately into, right, these two levels we had here, which was the daily high and then just the daily opening of that high. True, right? We respected this fair value gap here. Trading back into this volume imbalance or fair value gap once more. And they could be used more than once. Right, it's not a one and done type of thing. Right, I'm looking at the dollar as well, and it looks like the dollar is selling off. So since I'm seeing that, right, that would lead me to think we can create another high here in ES. NQ actually took its low. And this is kind of why Monday trading, right, is kind of not sketchy, but you have to be real nimble and quick. We had SMT at the highs here with NQ. So NQ failed to take its high. But now at these lows, right, we also have SMT with NQ. So NQ took its low on this dive down. NQ ran out the low from 10 o'clock, while ES is failing to. So we have bearish and bullish SMT occurring really at the same time, right? So it's not NQ, we can say, is really no help to us as far as determining a bias at this point, which is why I use the dollar. So right, if I see the dollar selling off while ES is trading into a PD array like this, that's a good sign that we could see another extension higher now after that. If not, right, and we want to just continue to consolidate in this range, that's always a possibility. I just muted. Swell. Does he have his mic? Oh, he does. Comedy. Swell, brother, if you can hear us. Your mic is not muted. Let's do this continued consolidation here. Let's go ahead and look on the higher time frame. We're actually right now trading inside of, right while we're kind of consolidating, I'll just show. We're inside of this hourly fair value gap here. Unless we have this spot that was never closed. Let's drag it across. So right, so this is what we're trading into now. Go back to that 1 minute. So now this is the hourly fair value gap, but I'm on the 1 minute chart. Right, and when you see that, that kind of gives a context of why we're just consolidating in this range now. Right, we're stuck between these two PD arrays. So just back and forth, chop. Notice how the bodies, right, after trading off this fair value gap once more and trading into this fair value gap, how the bodies are, right, trying to remain inside of this now. So add that with the idea that the dollar can continue to trade lower. And that's kind of tipping its hand that we could see, right, another price leg higher, at least to the high of this fair value gap to fully close it in if we want to remain bullish. But yeah, so far this morning, a lot of chop. A lot of difference between NQ and ES. Not really agreeing so far. Right, NQ took its low once more. So ES has failed 3 times to clear its low, while NQ has made 3 lower lows. We're also now trading inside of this inversion fair value gap. It's just in line with the lower portion of that 1 hour fair value gap, which is why you're seeing this. The body's holding inside of these, not only inversion fair value gap, but the 1 hour. And like we mentioned, now creating that another leg higher. Looking for this high to get ran out. Dollar selling off, so we like to see that. So let's say in these next 30 seconds that we fail to run this high, but this candle closes, leaving behind this fair value gap. I would then expect that to be a good area to buy at, with the idea that we could enter using this fair value gap, probably just target 5 handles, but look for another run higher to run out this buy side and eventually close in this hourly fair value gap. So we open with that volume imbalance. Watching to see once we trade into this closing price, do we continue to rally, right? And does this candle close bullish? That'll be a good telltale sign. There you go, just as you saw. So right, we've made a higher high here, closed in this hourly fair value gap. NQ still has failed to make a higher high though, and the dollar actually hasn't made a lower low either. So still, right, things really aren't symmetrical, things aren't in agreement this morning. We got that expansion though from the low of that hourly fair value gap, as we were thinking. Right now though, it's really 50-50 to where we can trade into this fair value gap here. I'll move all these other ones so you're not getting too confused. So we can trade into this fair value gap and hold and continue higher, or because right we have SMT now between NQ and the dollar, this could be the run on stops, right, to close in that 1 hour fair value gap. Now if we see displacement and this low get broken, then we could look for shorts. But like I mentioned, right, we're not trying to pick a top, so we're just watching and observing. Are these bullish signatures holding price? What's a 2 minute looking like? Yeah, so that 2 minute lines up with that 1 minute. Again, another leg higher. Dollar just took its low, right? So we'll see if dollar continues to sell off, which would give ES lift. We create this volume imbalance now, right? Every time we're creating these volume imbalances, I'm looking to see, once we trade into the close of this candle, right, do we basically reject and then continue to send price higher? This volume balance now, right, is in line with the high of that 1 hour fair value gap. So we'll see if this would be an area that wants to hold price. Since we traded above this hourly fair value gap, I would want this to remain open until we reach that liquidity pool, that buy side target. So I'm watching here, right, just monitoring. Are we respecting now these volume imbalances that got left behind? Ideally, I would like this one to hold here just because it's in line with that hourly fair value gap. But we can trade into these lower ones, right, these order blocks. If we start breaking through all these PD arrays, then, right, that's when I start looking to, okay, we could be reversing here now and start targeting shorts. But we let the candle bodies tell the story, right? We can wick into this, but notice how the candle body immediately retraces, right? And we see, does it close above this volume imbalance? If so, that's a pretty good indication that price wants to continue to run higher, and we could see just higher targets met or buy side. There we go. NQ seems to be reaching for its morning high, right? So because of that, that's why I'm also expecting higher prices on ES. And like we mentioned, right, the dollar continues to sell off. So this is kind of how I use intermarket relationships to just back my bias. Or if things aren't agreeing like earlier, right, it keeps me kind of on the sidelines and allows me to get more information before deciding what I expect to happen. Top of that one. Yeah, the top of this is 41.53 is the high there. So NQ just ran for its high. So now I would expect ES to reach up into, right, this area here. So I'm watching our down close candles holding price. So this level here I expect to hold if we want to remain bullish. And this level here is actually, I'll go ahead and show right on the 4 hour. On the daily, it's that open. But I'm also looking at the 4 hour. Right, to this level right. So this is that 4 hour fair value gap. Right, and then we have one just above. And I'm looking at the close of this fair value gap. That's where that first target would be. So there's that tiny fair value gap on that 4 hour. And then, of course, the swing point. You see we've created just a tiny baby fair value gap, right, in between these candles. So do we trade into that, into this down close candle and then continue higher? I'm watching the candle bodies, right, as always. Wicks can go lower than expected, but the bodies really tell the story. Right, dollar starting to retrace higher. NQ already ran its high, so now we could see, right, a retracement from here. Wicks do the damage, bodies, absolutely, brother. That's something that definitely helped me. Just understanding, right, the bodies of the candles tell the main narrative. Wicks can help, but yeah, if you pay real close attention to how the bodies close, that gives you good insight. Right, we're still just playing in that little order block area. Candles still, right, refusing to close any lower. So we open with this volume imbalance. Now I'd look for, as I mentioned, as always, right, if we trade back into this close here, so this level, do we reject that and send this higher? So I'll look for something like this, right, eventually looking to clear out these highs. Could just see it do it in one candle here without giving any rebalance. So we tapped that level a few times. And there we go, gets that expansion. So another high being formed. Now be wary here, right? Because as we're running this high, NQ is failing to run its high. Okay, so now we break below this low. Let's see. NQ. Okay, right, so this could be our smart money reversal point here. So we could have topped out. Just waiting to see how this candle closes. Let's go to higher time frame. Oh. Alright, so now we have this tiny fair value gap here. We want to watch. Do we get institutional order flow entry? Right, to send us lower now into our 1 hour fair value gap, which ultimately we could be targeting now this one that we left open, this breakaway gap. NQ is continuing. Let's see what DXY. So DXY is actually going higher. So now the high of that fair value gap has been repriced into. Do we see now? Do we break away and start targeting our sell side? Right, I'm looking at the dollar here. Looks like dollar wants to continue to rally, which if it does, that would help this idea here. NQ also, what's NQ looking like? NQ is also rallying though, right? So NQ looks like it wants to take its high. So because of that, or like I mentioned earlier, things not really in alignment, this would not be considered really a high probability setup for me. So while it can play out, this isn't necessarily something that I would expect to play out, if that makes sense. And that's why it's important to understand, right, intermarket analysis and narrative, because the patterns, you don't want to trade the patterns just for pattern's sake. That's where a lot of ICT students run into issues, is that we get really accustomed with seeing the patterns play out, right? And we start trading the patterns only without understanding that the patterns are there to help us execute when we're in alignment with our bias, right? So narrative is more important than the patterns themselves. NQ ran its high and then broke away sharply, while ES failed to run its high here. So right, so now we're kind of back in alignment of where we can see lower prices after trading below this fair value gap. So now, right, if I want this fair value gap to hold, you can enter using the low of this, the stop being just above the high of this candle, the swing high. And I would not want this high violated if I was looking to short. Because the wick already did most of the damage, right? We repriced into it, traded away, now rebalancing this area. So if price wants to remain short and start attacking sell side objectives, we really have no reason to trade back above this candle's swing high. Look at the bodies, right? Closing just perfectly in line with that fair value gap. My first area that I would look for us to trade into would be this, as I mentioned, this fair value gap here, which is the 1 minute fair value gap, as well as right that 2 minute fair value gap that was left open. Dollar's continuing to rally, so that supports this idea as we're watching it play out, creating that volume imbalance. So now if this volume imbalance stays open, right, this is where I would want to see price hold. Trading back into that hourly fair value gap, but now notice, right, we're inside that hourly fair value gap, as well as we have 1, 2 other volume imbalances here. So kind of opposing PD arrays. That's why we need to see, right, does price trade through these without respecting them? Or does price respect these PD arrays and continue higher? And that's another thing that makes the trade, right, not the highest probability, is that you can really frame trades in both directions. With the way that dollar is rallying, though, I would expect this now to just continue selling off. So if you notice, right, these are algorithmic signatures here at work. The high of this fair value gap, this is the hourly fair value gap, remember, right? We notice, look where this candle closes, perfectly in line with that, right? Notice the high of this candle now. perfectly hits that 1 hour fair value gap before trading lower. So if we were to leave this fair value gap open, that's also right in line now with this inversion volume imbalance. And we would also have a fair value gap here that we'd be looking at. So now this can kind of be a good area to look to short from. Oh, look at that. So as you see, right, we reach right back into that 1 minute fair value gap and continue to sell off. So as you saw, right, as we explained, once trading now back below this fair value gap, it becomes balanced. So as I pointed out, I would look to enter at the low. You've got entered here, stop above this candle. So we never reach for that stop. And then we reach for, right, 5 handles. So I would target 5 handles would take us beautifully, basically into the consequent encroachment. So there's my another 5 handle trade that I could have taken. And that's really why I like this method I have now, is that I could find 5 handles every day. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that a setup will present itself regardless of high impact, no impact, short and trading day, right? It doesn't really matter. I know that I can go in and 5 handles. That doesn't mean that I'm looking to trade every day, because I don't. But it just gives me that confidence that I don't ever need to be worried about missing a move or anything like that, because I know that I could always find, right, these 5 handles. So now we trade through the low of this fair value gap. So after trading back below and under it, I would expect us to remain bearish, especially if we clear out this low here. Dollar continues to rally. Yep, NQ selling off as well. Beautiful. Time frame. So now, right, I'm looking here. I would expect that fair value gap we pointed out earlier, this one, to remain unfilled. So I wouldn't want to see this, right? This should be a breakaway gap. And why is that? It's above this 1 hour fair value gap, so this takes priority. So if we want to remain bearish, there's no need for us to trade back, ideally above even like the consequent encroachment. Also, right, we have this breaker here, so swing high, swing low, come up, create this higher high. So once this low gets broken, this could be our breaker block, like this. Right now, ideally, I would like the half of that, so the mean threshold of this breaker block to hold, which once more, right, leaves this fair value gap above it. And this is kind of how I go about deciding which gaps I think will be breakaway gaps. So when you see me like labeling that I want this gap to remain unfilled, right, this is kind of what I'm doing to give me that idea. Ideally, I would like this inversion fair value gap here now, right? So this 1 minute fair value gap that we traded through and below, now I would like to see that act as resistance. So we could institutional order flow into this bigger fair value gap. But even for me, right, I would want that consequent encroachment to remain intact. So I wouldn't want us to see, or I wouldn't want to see us trade higher than this 1 minute fair value gap here. Ideally, if we're really bullish, we only trade up into this one and then continue selling off, targeting ultimately, right, this fair value gap here that was never traded into. And then if we really want to start accelerating, we have, right, these new week opening gap levels and a lot of inefficiencies left behind from this morning. while we have time here, y'all should just quickly either in the chat or you can unmute and say it. But do most of you guys trade ES as well, or I guess what is your guys' main instrument? ES, NQ. Okay, NQ is not bad either. ES, ES, nice, nice. US 500. Yeah, I feel that same thing. Cool. One forex pair. That's fair. I started with GU. That was kind of my baby, but as of late, man, forex has just been kind of gross for me. So, which is really kind of why I moved into ES. Cool, cool. I mean, regardless, it doesn't really matter what you trade because the concepts will play out the same, but just getting some info. And honestly, if you guys do trade other like instruments and ever want me to like just do a little analysis or kind of an outlook, that's something that I could possibly do too. Even though I don't trade those, right? They still the concepts still play out the same, so I can still read the price action pretty clearly. So now, right, playing just around the low of that 1 hour fair value gap. So we trade back into this one here. Honestly, ideally, I would like this gap to be a breakaway gap as well. So if we do want to attack this fair value gap, I want us to leave this one open. And why is that? Because right, we have this inversion fair value gap if you look here. So we have this inversion fair value gap lined up with the low of the hourly, also lined up with this or this. Sorry, restart. This in itself is not an inversion fair value gap. This is just a normal bearish fair value gap that we're using once more. This one here is the inversion fair value gap because it was right a bullish fair value gap or a BISI, as Michael calls it, that gets traded through, and now we use that as resistance. Yeah, since we have these two fair value gaps lined up here, that's also in line with the low of the hourly fair value gap. I would not expect this higher fair value gap to be traded into. Right, so like for me, this would be our so I would expect this to be our breakaway gap. And would not want to see price trade into it prior to us trading into this low and this fair value gap here. These sessions. Actually, I don't know if these. Oh, there we go. Let me check. I'll bet. Yeah, okay. So this one should be, yeah, this session should be recorded actually, so I could post that. Is that something that you think you would want me to do, honestly? So like I record the live sessions as well, just in case you miss out. Actually, yeah, I'll probably just do that regardless. Just in case there's people that do miss out on those live sessions, they can kind of go back and see them. So beautiful, right? That breakaway gap now playing out well. See if we deliver into this low, ultimately into that fair value gap. So okay, we deliver now back into this fair value gap that was left behind, clearing out sell side here. Notice the body closing, right? We dive into it, body retraces, closes just above. Yeah, we look to be extremely bullish now though. So if we trade through this, right, now we start attacking this level here and ultimately trading back into our new week opening gap. So right, this was our new week opening gap for this week. So I would expect us, oh yeah, and look at that, right? That fair value gap lines up perfectly almost with that. So now I almost have no hesitation that this level should be at least traded into. Which if that's the case, then you could almost, I guess depending on how, like say, right, we broke through this fair value gap and the candle closed. So not what it's doing now, how we have a wick. But if we traded through this with displacement and closed below it, then I would look to use that fair value gap to go short, right, into now our lower targets. Can you show how you're looking at the DXY? Oh, sure, yeah. So I guess, right, I have like multiple screens up. So I guess that's why it could be hard for you is I have like one, two, I guess 3 screens and like another laptop, so 4 technically that I'm looking at. You're really only seeing like my main trading screen here. But what I'm doing when I'm looking at like the dollar or like NQ, so we'll go back to when we were in this area. Right, since you've already seen, yeah, we're just going to continue selling off here. But so when we were using like this fair value gap here, right, and I was explaining the DXY confluences. What time is this? 10:33. 10:30. Okay, so at 10:33, right, DXY is here. So we had just broken structure, left behind the volume imbalance. While at the same time, ES had just wicked through this fair value gap and traded lower, right, rebalancing that fair value gap. So when I see that, right, this is indicating to me that the dollar is poised to continue rallying higher, looking for buy side, especially after creating that volume imbalance. So seeing that, right, that really aligns my idea that ES should continue trading lower from where we were at. So I understand that ES has rebalanced its bearish fair value gap and now has sell side targets to look for, while DXY has broken structure to the top side and created, right, bullish PD arrays that should be respected. So that right there is market symmetry, dollar moving up while ES should be moving down. And that's kind of how I use that to my advantage. Right, I was slightly wary at first because I mentioned NQ here was running higher. I thought it might want to run this high, but we fell short, right, and cleared this high instead. So this is that 10:33 candle, right? So this is we ran this high, had a higher high here, while ES was making a lower high. So SMT there, right between ES and NQ, while at the same time, dollar was going higher, so supporting this SMT between the two. If that makes sense. It can kind of get confusing, honestly, with intermarket relationships and whatnot, and it did take me some time to learn, but right, once you understand it, that's really how you find those high probability setups and how it keeps you out of those losing trades that may look like a good setup, but ultimately don't play out in your favor. So do you see it continuing to just sell off this morning? So we called right that smart money reversal at the high, called that fair value gap, and now we're just selling off. Right, called, and you understand why we expected this to be a breakaway gap. So now I'm watching to see if this inverse. Yeah, Brisket. So this fair value gap, I'm assuming, is what you were questioning. And as you saw, right, we traded through it, traded back up into it, before ultimately now trading lower and away. Created the volume imbalance. Volume imbalances are kind of my little secret that I use to see whether I'm on sides. So like if I'm bearish and I'm seeing like volume imbalances form, right, that basically tells me that I'm on side. That price is heavy. It's reaching for something. Same thing with the bullish fair value gaps or volume imbalances. Sorry. So let's see where we are now. So now we've traded back into the new week opening gap, the price action from last night. So from here we could see consolidation into lunch hour, especially with it being 11. I'll probably wrap the stream up at 11. For me personally, my trading hours are from I'll say about 8 to 11. So if there's like high impact news at 8:30, I'll get on just a little before that to see what we did overnight. Look to engage. If we don't have high impact news at 8:30, like how we had today at 10, right? I'll just wait until that news driver hits, and then my morning's usually done by 11 o'clock, which is nice because I mean, as you see, right, we had two moves that we called out here already that we could have took a part of, as well as the one I took a part of this morning. So there's really no need for me to be looking for more. I would like to see though, so we trade below. Let me go back to that 1 minute. Look at that. It's not random. Look at the precision. And once you really understand these concepts, right, things like this just jump out to you a lot. So notice how this volume imbalance is perfectly in line, right, with this fair value gap. So the low of this fair value gap. While creating, this should be a balanced price range. So notice where the low of this candle stops, right at the high of that new week opening gap to the tick, right, not random. So to me, this would be a balanced price range. We've traded down, price had retraced and repriced higher, right, leaving no inefficiency between these candles, and then we left that range. So now this high, if we want to remain bullish, has no need to be traded into. Add to the fact that it's lined up perfectly with, right, this new week opening gap high, and then the high of that 15-minute fair value gap. And that really tells me that if I was to short some more, right, this could be another shorting opportunity where I would look for this volume imbalance paired with the fair value gap to be a short, ultimately leading us towards, right, that 8:30 opening here. And then if we want to just continue to sell off, the low now of that new week opening gap. So this could be something that, right, you monitor just over lunch, see how it plays out. But this would be where I'm looking for another setup to form here. I mean, look at that, right? Look where the high, right? So the high of this fair value gap is the high of the new week opening gap. Perfect. The low of that fair value gap, the low of this volume imbalance. So the algorithm, right, you references these points multiple times. That's kind of what built my confidence over the years, is just seeing things like this, right? Algorithmic theories and principles that it's just hard to deny that there's more than just randomness going on here, right? Consolidating off this order block here. So now once more, just stuck between PD arrays. And that's when we consolidate, right? When we're stuck in between PD arrays like this, that's when we find those consolidations happening. So like when we were here, right? Consolidating between the PD arrays. Oh, what the heck? Right now we're trading below this volume imbalance. So this is kind of how I follow and track price. Right? Do we respect the PD arrays that we're in right now? As of now, right, this volume imbalance is what's being referenced. As you can see, right, look at the bodies closing right there on those levels perfectly. So while I would like this fair value gap to be traded into, right, and that would be what I would look to enter, I could understand that we could break lower from here without actually needing to trade any higher and continue to attack sell side. But yeah, a lot of conflicting PD arrays in this level, which is why you see, right, that consolidation we're getting now. And there you go, as you see. So right, as we explained, price didn't need to reach back up into this because why? We were trading below this volume imbalance here. Right, so we dove through both of these on this trade down, tapped off that order block, attempted to get back up here, failed to. Found resistance at this volume imbalance, right? Becomes an inversion volume imbalance. And then we deliver. Look at where that candle closes perfectly to, right, that 15-minute fair value gap. Precision. And now notice, right, this also didn't need to be traded into because if we take the consequent encroachment of that, notice where the 50% lines up. Look at that. Even seeing stuff like that now makes me just enjoy it, right? The consequent encroachment of this, so this level here, is perfectly in line with what? Right, the high of this volume imbalance. Which also ends up being, what's the highest candle body after trading below, right? So we trade through these volume imbalances. The highest candle body that closes perfectly on that level, right? So the low of this candle comes in at 4137.25, right? The close of this candle, 4137.25. Can't get better than that. Even now, look at that, right? We're trading back into the order block. The body is respecting this fair value gap perfectly. So we see, does this candle close now below this fair value gap? If it does, then we can continue to possibly see, right, just lower prices until ultimately that new week open gap is reached. Because as you see, right, we have this low here that fell just short of that new week opening gap. Can you show me looking? CE of what? Oh, okay, sorry. So the consequent encroachment of, right, so take this 15-minute fair value gap that I'm labeling, right? As we trade through it now, it can become our inversion fair value gap. So now we're on a lower time frame, remember, and this is, yeah, it can get confusing because changing the time frames can be tricky. But now while there's no fair value gap here, this is the 15-minute fair value gap. So if I take, let me move these so we can kind of see better. I'll move this line. So now if I take the consequent encroachment of that, which is just 50%, so I'm using my fib to go from high to low, right? The 50% level of that comes in at 4137.25. So after trading through that consequent encroachment, since price wanted to remain bearish, right, we don't need to reach back above it. So when we see that, right, and then also pointed out that volume imbalance, perfectly in line with it, right, that's not random. That tips its hand that this could be a good area to look to short at, which is why, right, this became our breakaway gap, this fair value gap here. And as I mentioned, right, the candle bodies, while the wicks were going higher, the highest closed candle body was to the tick, that consequent encroachment. And now as you see, right, look at the candle bodies just closing right under that. That to me kind of tips its hand that we could see continued sell-off. Get people kind of thinking this may be a fake bottom. 2-minute. So we're trading off of this little 2-minute BISI here. So that's kind of what we're stuck in between now, right? Consolidating. And yeah, there we go. As you mentioned, should see another leg lower to clear out these lows. Ultimately, I think that 8:30 opening is in the crosshairs. I think that's what price is trying to head for. Clear that high. Yeah, especially like you see these here. These lows are too clean in my opinion. So sell side would be here if we want to continue running sell side. That lines up with this fair value gap left behind here, so it's a good little area to look for. So we use the bottom of that fair value gap as resistance. Now trade below this fair value gap here. So let's see, right, does this fair value gap offer resistance now? Or do we just wick below, continue running higher? Personally, right, I wouldn't look for longs until at least this 8:30 opening was hit. So I would like that level to be traded to before we get a reversal, which we can reverse from here, and right, that's fine. I would just miss that. Thoughts on the New York Open? Would you use as a resistance? Yeah, so the New York Open, right, I have labeled out always. So I have an indicator that marks the New York Open, which is this level here, so that 12 a.m. open, that dotted line, and then I have an indicator that marks the 8:30 opening, which is this level. And I'll use these levels almost every single day, right? So I use them for my power of 3 understanding. So like let's say we've done all this price action trading above the New York Open, and now we've traded back below this New York Open here. So right, say theoretically we're trading below this level. I would expect that New York Open, yes, to act as resistance because we've already done right the manipulation for the daily range above that New York Open. So once we trade below it, I would just look for more distributions to the downside. And then vice versa for longs, right? If we have created some sort of manipulation, kind of like on Friday, what I explained, we created that manipulation lower, right? So we open at midnight, create the manipulation lower, eventually breaking above it. Now I expect that New York Open level, right, to act as support, ultimately sending us higher throughout the day. The 8:30 opening is kind of the same idea, except rather than using it for the whole day, like how I'll use this midnight open throughout the whole day, I utilize the 8:30 opening only for the morning session, really. So seeing something like this, right, when we open at 8:30, when we break below and create that market structure shift higher, leaving behind that volume imbalance in line with the 8:30 open, that's a high probability setup in my eyes. So I would look to buy using that 8:30 open as support, and as you see, right, it does end up supporting price, setting us higher throughout the morning until ultimately trading where we are now, right? I thought we would attack that 8:30 open as you see, so we're digging for it now. And we tap it to the tick and trade through it. After trading below this fair value gap, right, and notice what happens once we trade below it. Look at the bodies of these two candles. Wicks can do the damage, but what do we say? Bodies tell the story. They close perfectly right on that high before, boom, diving into what level? The 8:30 opening to the tick, random. Before now, what are we doing? Retracing. The 8:30 open on my chart today. Nice. Good to hear. Decent. Yeah, that's something that I found early on that I've used in my trading that's helped me greatly. And a lot of people have I've helped kind of understand that concept and they use it now too, which is cool to see, but no, I'm glad, honestly. It's cool to see that. Same with the Judas swing. Right, not trying to toot my own horn here, but like a lot of people never really understood how to utilize it. but once I kind of taught them, it was GG's. And like a good example is come on, I'm drawing a blank. Phantom. If you guys know Phantom at all, Phantom Trading. He's another just person in this space on Twitter and stuff. But he was someone who I helped a lot with that, understanding that Judah swing concept early on in his journey. And as you see now, right, that's kind of his whole image on Twitter, is that understanding how to use that Judah swing. So now we've traded below that 830 opening. So in a case like this, right, now I would expect that 830 open to act as resistance and send us into ultimately that final target we had of that new week opening gap low. So like I would expect this to be a breakaway gap, this one here. I would not want to see us trade back into that before our sell side is met. Right, and why do I expect kind of this to be open? For one, right, we're below that 830 opening. But we also have this little fair value gap here that price traded in and through. So I like to see that kind of act as resistance. But we also have that balanced price range on this candle. So when we create the wick lower, trade back up, repricing, right? Filling in all the inefficiencies. So once we leave that range here, this low would kind of become the balanced price range. So ideally, I would like to leave this open, attack our new week opening gap. But just because we sold off so much already, right, we could get a retracement into this fair value gap, which is permissible. Just for me, I would like to see that left open. And there we go, break lower again. Off of that fair value gap we pointed out, right? Look at the bodies once more. High that closes perfectly in line. What does the high of this one close? Perfectly in line with 830. And then this one, the high of that taps the 830 opening and closes perfectly inside of that fair value gap. Before, ultimately what, creating that volume imbalance. What does it do here, as we say? It goes back up to the close of this candle before then boom, right? Diving into what's it reaching for? Our new week opening gap here now. So like this, I would expect an immediate rebalance to occur. So after trading into now, right, the low of this candle, I would want to see this candle remain where it is or trade lower now into our new week opening gap. So I wouldn't want to see us trade any higher than, honestly, this candle here. So I like this candle to close, do what it's doing now, right? We can trade into this, immediately rebalance, and then trade lower is kind of what I would want to look for. With us being so close to this new week opening gap low, as well as, right, we just cleared this swing low. So I would like us to now clear this swing low. Right, we trade higher into this volume imbalance and this fair value gap once more. So we'll see, right, do we close below this 830 opening? Right, notice where that candle body closes. random, right at the high of that fair value gap. See what NQ is doing. So NQ actually made a lower low. The dollar's retracing. Looks like it could go higher though. Yeah, I mean, I would still aim for this low here. That's kind of where my ultimate target would be, but just have SMT between the two indices now, so could see a slight retracement. Ultimately, though, that final target for me is still 41.27. So I'm looking at the range now of this up close candle, right? The whole candle. Ideally, I would like the midpoint of this candle to hold price, as you see here, right? So I'm taking the mid of this up close candle that we just formed. I would like the midpoint of that, if we trade into that, to act as resistance to send us lower. As you see here, we got that. So now I'm just waiting, right? Do we continue, I guess, to respect that midpoint and deliver us into our new week opening gap low? Oh, whoa, whoa. What am I doing? Easy. So you see, right, we fall just short. Let's see what NQ is looking like. As I mentioned, NQ made that lower low, so we have SMT here at these lows. Could start seeing a retracement now into this range. This would kind of be my last line of defense here. So while I wanted this to remain unfilled, right, we can trade into this, into our balanced price range here, and then deliver lower. If we trade higher than this, though, and like back above this fair value gap, and kind of into this fair value gap, I would just need to wait and get more information before really picking a bias and deciding what I expect us to do. Because really, as of now, right, I could see us respecting here and trading lower, or I could also see, right, we could find support now at this small fair value gap, this 830 opening, as well as this order block, and continue rallying higher. So right now we're just in textbook, right, 50-50 conditions. Just need to wait and see. Like right when I'd be shorting, so I'd be shorting from probably like up here, right, where we called out the breakaway gaps or our entries. And often you'll see me adding positions, but like once we reach an area like this where we're near my target, I'm no longer adding positions at certain areas. I'm just watching and managing my position. So I'm using these. It's kind of like where my stop loss would be. So like if I was in a theoretical trade, for me, my stop would be above this swing high here. That's where I would be taken out at. So if the trade gets any higher than this, that kind of invalidates my short idea, and I just need to reassess and see what price wants to do from there. So we fully close in this fair value gap now. Now, what I don't want to see is us find support at this fair value gap and continue higher. Because then that to me means that we're probably bullish, looking to now target some sell side targets. Or buy side targets, sorry. I could return into this breakaway gap that we left here. Yeah, so since we really traded above this and the candle body closed above it, I will look for this fair value gap to offer support now. So now, right, I'm leaning more towards a run higher, potentially leading us into this fair value gap that we left behind previously. Go ahead and move this. Remember, this is just a 15-minute fair value gap, but I'll go ahead and take that off so you can see a little better. All right, if we trade through this one now too as well, so now we would have traded back up and above two fair value gaps. Now look for these areas to act as support. Mm, 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 mm. Well, at 2 minute, we actually have this fair value gap in here still. So if we do break below this one, this could still be a valid area. Mm. We're expecting the fair value gap at the 8:30. Breakaway. Oh, here. Is there? Yes. So ideally, right, I would expect this to be a breakaway gap. But like I mentioned, because that 2 minute is still open here, if we did trade into that, that's permissible, but kind of like you're seeing now. I expected this fair value gap to hold after trading back above it and closing above it with the body here. As you see, right, the low of this candle taps that in perfectly, and then we create another leg higher. So we're trading above now that consequent encroachment of this new week opening gap. So I would like us to hold here actually, as you see, right, where the body's closing on this candle, right on that consequent encroachment, and now we're getting that reaction. So yeah, now at this point, I would fully want this to remain open. So my stop would be below, basically below this candle. Stick around till about 11:30 here, and then I'll go ahead and head out for this morning. If you guys have any questions or anything you want to ask now while I'm here, feel free. Not really expecting too much now. Do you trade the afternoon? Yes. So the afternoon session, like power hour for me, honestly, is my, yeah, I could probably say probably my favorite session. Right. So I'll either trade just that morning session I mentioned, the 8 to 11, if I don't find anything during that time, or if I just, want to step away and kind of let that morning price action play out, I come back from 3 to 4 p.m. New York time. So that last hour of the trading day is really where I look to engage as well. And if you go through my Twitter, you'll see that, right? A lot of the videos I post are from power hour. So I definitely enjoy that time period. The afternoon session technically starts at like 1:30, but yeah, just for me, I guess it's personal preference really. I always like waiting until that last hour of the trading day. So while there's still plenty of valid setups that start forming really right at 1:30, I like to wait till 3 p.m. just to give price action the chance to play around. And it gives me a little more insight going into that final hour of trading of where we might want to reach for. So you see we trade into this fair value gap here once more. Right now, after doing that, I would want us to expand. I don't want to see any more really consolidation. Just getting some time distortion now. Heading into that lunch hour, and this is really why I stopped trading at 11. Because right, as you see at 11 o'clock is kind of when we dive into our 8:30 and our sell side targets. And since then, little retracement, but mostly just chop. So no, yeah, I wouldn't expect, honestly, this low even to be ran. So if I was in a trade, my stop would be below this swing low here. Because we've came into this fair value, traded through it, came back down to the low of it, rebalancing it and left. Right, traded once more into the consequent encroachment of that fair value gap. So really, if you want to remain bullish, we have no need to go below that consequent encroachment. We'll start looking for expansion through these previous levels here, right through this volume imbalance into our fair value gap ultimately. So I'd want to see us hold right at the close of these candles. If we're going to remain bullish. Look at these candles. Look at where the close is on these, right? They're all perfectly level here. This is that 2-minute fair value gap here now. Right, tap that to the tick, that low of that fair value gap. So we should see expansion from here. All right, look at the bodies. Closing right there at that low perfectly, as well as these bodies now at the high. So I'm watching to see, right, does this candle body close basically in line with these? Which it does. So yeah, honestly at this point I would just call it a morning for me. Not a fan of the chop, as you see. I've already called out really the major moves, right? This morning, that whole sell-off was kind of the move for the AM session. So yeah, I think I'll wrap it up here. Hope you guys found that insightful, right? Just our first one. So yeah, I hope it went all right as we continue to do it. Even right, hopefully I'll get a little better. Just kind of explaining my thoughts. It might have been a little confusing at times and rushed or jumbled, but yeah, we'll look to improve together. So yeah, if that's really all, if anyone has any questions before I head out, go ahead and let me know. But if not, thanks for the morning. I enjoyed you guys spending time here with me. And always feel free to just reach out or hit me up in the Discord if you have any questions or something like that too. I'll be on most of the time. So yeah, have a good rest of the morning, and I'll see you guys around. We'll look to do these live streams. I can't promise it'll be every day, but I'd like to do it at least 2 or 3 times a week. Usually Fridays I don't trade, so that'll be a day where we have off. But yeah, I'll try to get these in at least 2, 3, 4 times a week because I think it's helpful just to hear my thought process and what I'm looking at and things like that. Of course, right, as I say, let's get off. You get that expansion. But yeah, as we expected, right, that expansion from this little fair value gap here on that 2-minute after trading back above the 1-minute fair value gap. The bodies are finding support here inside of this. And yeah, we should be aiming now for this fair value gap. But yeah, until the afternoon, I'll see you guys around, and take care, fellas.